Oxygen, I just want to share a few quick thoughts with you today about how we as Christians are not silent. As Christians, we cannot allow the world to silence us. It's so easy for worldly influences like TV, social media, friends, so easy for the world to not only silence our spirituality, but also warp our destiny. And what I mean by that is Christians are constantly being told to shut up, to keep their faith to themselves. We are told that the Bible is no longer relevant. We're told that we need to shift our focus onto worldly desires like money, sex, and fame. And because the noises of this world can be so loud, because peers can be so pressuring, it can be so easy for us, so easy for our voice to be shut up. And then we live a silent faith, a faith that only exists within the four walls of a church. But I want to tell you today that you're not meant to be silent. You are meant to share the good news, to share your story, to share the gospel. We're not created to be silent Christians. We are not created to conform to this world. We're created to chase after God's heart, after God's desires, not earthly desires. And let me tell you, the more silent you become, the less you are fulfilling your God-designed destiny. And we cannot allow our voices to be drowned out by the crowd. In the book of Matthew, chapter 20, there's this really incredible story about two blind beggars. And these two men were sitting on the road outside the walls of Jericho. And they hear this rumbling in the crowd, and they ask somebody what's going on, and they're told that Jesus is passing by. And so immediately, without any hesitation, they shout out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on us." And the crowd tries to shut them up. The crowd tells them to be quiet, like they were making too much of a scene. But the two blind men didn't see it that way. Maybe they didn't have the sight to see Jesus in the physical, but they had the faith to know that Jesus could do something miraculous in their lives that day, and so they shouted even louder. And that day, Jesus healed them, and he restored their sight, all because they chose to speak up. In the book of Esther, we learn that Esther is chosen to become the new queen. But when she's chosen, she keeps her nationality a secret. She's actually a Jew. And she hears later on in her reign as queen, she hears that a high official has this evil plot to wipe out the entire Jewish population. And when she hears this, she has one of two options. One, stay silent about her nationality and watch her entire family, her people, her friends be killed, potentially herself, if she's found out. Or two, speak up and see what happens. And I love what Mordecai says to her in verse 14. Mordecai is her adopted father, and he says to her, if you stay silent right now, help will come from someplace else and your entire family is going to be wiped out. But maybe you were made queen for such a time as this. Oxygen, maybe you were made for such a time as this. Maybe you were placed into your family, into your household for such a time as this. Maybe you were placed into your school for such a time as this. Maybe you immigrated here from another country and you were placed in New Zealand for such a time as this. When two blind men spoke up, they received sight. When Esther the queen spoke up, she saved a nation of people. Imagine what could happen if only you chose to speak up. Imagine what could happen if you shared your story with your friend. Imagine what could happen if you shared the good news of the gospel with people at your school. Imagine what could happen if you chose to not stay silent, because the world needs to hear your story. The world needs to hear the gospel. At Oxygen, we are not silent.